The biggest sleeper for the 2024 fantasy football season based on ADP has to be Rhamondre Stevenson, who is sitting around RB 19 to 20 on ESPN and Yahoo ADP, right around that 5-6 round term, which is an amazing value for a player that I believe is going to finish as a top 12 fantasy running back again this year. I mean, have we forgotten that in 2022, Rhamondre rushed for over 1,000 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, while also, and most importantly, hauling in 69 receptions on 88 targets for another 400 yards and a touchdown, finishing as the fantasy RB7 overall and the RB11 in fantasy points per game. And have we also forgotten that through the first 12 weeks of the 2023 season before he got hurt, that Stevenson was basically doing all of that all over again, pacing for 900 rushing yards, another 400 receiving yards, 6 total touchdowns, and all of that on nearly 290 total touches. And that was in one of the most dreadful offenses I've probably ever seen, an offense that failed to score more than 7 points in 4 of Stevenson's 12 games played, and no more than 17 points in 9 of those 12 games. And I'm not going to say that the Patriots are going to be light years better this year than what they were last year, make like a Houston Texans 180, but you can't get worse than what they were last year, right? I mean, they massively upgraded the quarterback situation with a great rookie QB in Drake May, plus a quality veteran in Jacoby Brissett. They drafted 2 rookie wide receivers that I have high hopes for in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, plus they signed KJ Osborne in free agency, who has been a great wide receiver 3 in Minnesota for the past few years. You get rid of the stale offense that they had and replace it with a coordinator coming from Cleveland under Kevin Stefanski and has also worked with Aaron Rodgers in the past. And all of this has happened around Rhamondre Stevenson, who has still retained the RB1 role in what should be a very improved offense for 2024. I really would not at all be surprised if Stevenson had like an Alvin Kamara type season or a Rashad White style season from 2023, thriving on receiving volume while still being the workhorse on the ground, finding the end zone every now and then, and posting an RB1 fantasy season like he did back in 2022. He is probably my favorite running back target to target as my RB2, which at that 5-6 turn, you can stack wide receiver talent early, you can grab an elite RB1 or even an elite tight end early, and still be able to grab Stevenson for the upside of a top 10 back at RB2 prices. Before we move on, I wanted to let y'all know to head over to 4for4.com and sign up for a subscription today to gain access to the industry's best fantasy rankings from award-winning ranker for accuracy, John Paulson. Plus, you get access to our live draft assistant, cheat sheets, trade calculator, articles, and there are additional packages for DFS and betting content too. Make sure to use the code YouTube at checkout to receive 25% off your annual subscription today. All right, now moving on to my breakout candidate. Nobody in fantasy this year makes more sense for a massively explosive 2024 campaign than Dolphins running back De'Von Achane, the absolute lightning in a bottle and potential RB1 in this high caliber Miami offense. Just to recap what De'Von Achane did last year, he played 9 games in which he played at least 40% of snaps, and in those 9 games, he averaged 14 touches, 110 total yards, 1.2 total touchdowns, and 20.9 fantasy points per game, which would have made him the RB3 on the season last year behind only Kyren Williams and Christian McCaffrey. Even if you remove the 50 bomb that he dropped in week 3, he still averaged 17 points per game in his other 8 games, which would have been good for RB7 last year, sandwiched right between Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs. That is the type of game-breaking ability that Achane has for fantasy football. And to take this one step further, there are 2 key tweets that I've seen on Twitter that really drives home the upside for Achane in year 2. The first is from Ryan Heath at fantasypoints.com, who found that since 2014, only 7 rookie running backs drafted in rounds 1 through 3 of the NFL draft outperformed their weighted opportunities per game by 2.5 PPR points per game. Achane is the only rookie running back to do that from last year, and minus J.K. Dobbins missing his sophomore season with an ACL injury, the other 5 running backs all went on to have volume increases in year 2, and 4 out of 5 averaged 20 PPR points per game in year 2. The only one who didn't was 2016 Todd Gurley, who was playing in a Jeff Fisher offense, but as we all know, went on to have multiple 25-plus point per game seasons after Jeff Fisher was fired in a Shanahan/Sean McVay offense. Ryan also pointed out that all 5 of those backs experienced regression in their efficiency from year 1 to year 2, but the increases in volume more than made up for the losses of that efficiency. And then we have the second tweet from fellow YouTuber Ron Stewart, who again found that Achane is one of 7 rookie running backs since 2009 to hit 3+ fantasy points over expectation. The other 6 all went on to post 20+ point per game seasons in year 2, and he also notes that Achane posted the the highest fantasy points over expectation season by any rookie running back since 2009. So if we expect Achane to follow suit with recent history over the last 10 to 15 years of rookie running backs, he is in for an absolutely bonkers 2024 season. The only thing that could possibly stop Achane this year would really just be injury, which was his primary issue last year too. But in college, Achane played 30 out of a possible 34 games over his career, and we have seen plenty of NFL running backs struggle with injuries in one season and then play an entire season right after that. It's just the nature of the running back position in the NFL. The point is that you should not be scared of injuries when you are drafting, but what you should be scared of is missing out on a legitimate league winner at the running back position, especially when that player is consistently being taken in the late second or even third round of your fantasy drafts. It has now just entered my mind that it is currently possible to leave your draft with Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, and Devon Achane on your team. Like, how do you even begin to compete with that team in your fantasy league? Please, everybody, try to get that trio. Let me know if you actually do, because that is just absolutely insane if you can pull that off. And then finally, we have to talk about my bust candidate for 2024, a player that I believe is honestly the worst pick in the entire top 100 of ADP this year. Raiders running back Zamir White. Please, I beg you, do not fall into the trap of drafting Zamir White this year, because guys, we play this game every year and it never works. There's always that one running back who gets massively pushed up draft boards because of super small sample sizes and potentially massive volume, but everybody overlooks the fact that that player is usually just not that good. Alexander Mattison is the easy example because it's fresh in our minds from last year. He did really well in games that Dalvin Cook missed, but he's actually just not that good of a running back, and even though he got volume last year, he was not good for fantasy football. In 2022, it ended up being Chase Edmonds, who signed with the Dolphins as their potential RB1 after posting very strong weeks with the Cardinals, filling in for an injured James Conner. Well, Chase Edmonds didn't rush for over 35 yards once and was traded to Denver by week 9 and was a complete fantasy football bust. In 2021, it was Mike Davis, who signed with the Atlanta Falcons after a huge season in Carolina, filling in for Christian McCaffrey, and was the presumed RB1 in a brand new Arthur Smith offense. And unfortunately, Davis just was not good for fantasy. He never topped 55 yards in a game once and was once again another fantasy bust. In 2020, it was Kenyon Drake who tripped everyone into a top 12 fantasy ADP, really just because of 3 games with the Cardinals post David Johnson, but ultimately finished outside the top 25 in points per game behind Ronald Jones and Clyde Edwards-Helaire that year. In 2019, it was Damian Williams. In 2018, it was Alex Collins. 2017, Isaiah Crowell. 2016, Jeremy Langford. 2015, Andre Ellington. The list goes on, and who is the glaringly obvious candidate for the 2024 season but Zamir Alexa White? This is a brand new coaching staff, brand new offensive system than what the Raiders had last year. This is not the same offensive coordinator that was calling plays when White did well for 4 games without Josh Jacobs last year. He is not a receiving threat. That is Amir Abdullah's role. And no one has seemed to mention the fact that 3 of the 4 defenses he faced last year were bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. 2 of them were actually bottom 5. He did tear up the Kansas City Chiefs. I will give him credit there, but that was also a cold, divisional, outdoor December game where the Raiders actually scored twice on defense and were up by 2+ scores for more than half the game. So White was really just running down the clock and got massive volume because the Raiders were trying to win the game. But when you look at what he did last year in those 4 games, he averaged just 15 fantasy points per game on 23 touches per game over that 4-game stretch. That is horribly inefficient from a point per touch standpoint. I seriously would not be surprised if he was not the starter by the end of the year, kind of like this year's version of Dameon Pierce, who lost his job halfway through last year to Devin Singletary. I just don't get why he's being valued as a mid to back end RB2 in ADP, and there are so many other running backs around him that I would much rather have. Guys like Rhamondre Stevenson is going around him, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, James Conner, Brian Robinson even. Please do not draft Zamir White this year in your leagues.